So, for my question, I had a foreign question, and what are the impacts of animal abuse and into animal captivity? And it's a deeper look into the effects captivity has on orcas in marine parks like SeaWorld. So, for my introduction, I just wanted to state how fond I am of animals and how much I love them, and that as a young girl, I loved going to zoos and aquariums and learning everything I could about these animals and just viewing them. It was just so spectacular to see this. But a few years ago, my family and I went to Orlando, Florida, and we spent a day at SeaWorld. This was amazing. I was in my glory. I went to all the attractions and I loved seeing these animals. And then a few years later, a documentary in 2013 called Blackfish came out. It changed everything about what people believed about captivity and really sparked my interest in this conversation about orca captivity. So the documentary itself features never before seen footage of what happens in the behind the scenes, if you say, in SeaWorld, and it has eyewitness accounts of what happens to these whales when they are in captivity. It also shows that these whales struggle to survive in this unnatural environment. The former trainers that speak out against this um, share awful and gruesome stories about what they've seen, about what happens to the whales, what the whales do to each other, and even some of the deaths caused by the whales because of how aggressive they get. This article is necessary in this um, conversation because it shows that confinement is simply a form of animal abuse, concealed by the happy, magical, and magnificent appearance of the shows. The authors responded to my question in that captivity does have negative effects on these animals. Theme parks that hold large aquatic animals in captivity force these whales from their homes into a man made pool, basically, of salt water, and they are forced to perform unnatural behaviors that wouldn't be seen in the wild. This leads to the whales becoming agitated and becoming violent and aggressive towards other whales and people. It shows how these whales do develop behavioral issues and their quality of life is significantly decreased in captivity. In this scholarly article, we see that SeaWorld denies the claims and refuses to see what they're doing to these whales is wrong. They are forced to live in small tanks, causing severe physical and emotional trauma, and corporate doesn't care about the well being of the whales, just that they bring in huge amounts of revenue every year. So, in order to have an orca exhibit at a marine park or aquarium alike, there's only one way to get a real one, and that is by kidnapping one from the wild. So, for SeaWorld, they had fishermen take boats and planes to spot the whales and then drive them into a cove where they dropped huge nets to capture the whales, and then they just picked out whatever whales they wanted. This puts major distress on the whale that is being kidnapped and the whales that are remain in the ocean. These families become separated and they have absolutely no idea what is happening. And the whale that is being kidnapped, it puts major distress on them and marks them with emotional trauma that lasts their entire lives and also leads to them being aggressive. This TED Talk called Let's Throw Shamu a Retirement Party, where Dr. Naomi A. Rose talks about orca whale families and how similar they are to human families. The offspring are dependent on their mothers for almost everything, and they live with their mother for their duration of her life. When they are taken from this environment, they suffer. It destroys families. It even affects their lifespan. In the wild, orcas are documented to living from 90 to even 100 years. They usually live around the human lifespan. However, in captivity, that number drops to around 25 to 30 years. That is a significant decrease. SeaWorld claims that they live longer in their parks than they do in the ocean, which is very far from the truth. So some of the physical trauma that you see in whales is dorsal fin collapse. If you see killer whales in marine parks, almost all of their male whales have dorsal fins that are flopped over. SeaWorld claims that this is natural and that it happens to almost all whales in the wild, which is not true. If you see killer whales in the wild, this happens to less than 1% of these whales. Orcas in the wild have the ability to swim up to 100 miles a day in any direction they please. But in captivity, these large animals swim in circular motions and in shallow pools. This causes the tissue in their dorsal fin to become weak and unhealthy and flop over, causing them back pain, and it's just not natural. The captivity of these animals affects their physical stature and has direct impact on their health. In the wild, there are little to no reports of any killer whale ever harming a human being. This is very different compared to those who are living in a marine park. If we look at the past few years alone, SeaWorld has had multiple deaths and dozens of attacks. However, there is no correlation between the behavior of free whales and the behavior of animals in captivity. This directly leads to that captivity has direct impacts on these whales and their behavior. It causes them stress due to the nature of their confinement, leading them to be aggressive to other dolphins and humans alike. This is extremely important in knowing that there are violent impacts of captivity. In this scholarly article, it quotes, "The practice of keeping killer whales in captivity has proven to be detrimental to the health and safety of these animals and trainers alike. It is crucial that we stop orca whale captivity in order to preserve orca whale lives and also human lives. There are several issues around the captivity, including that numerous deaths have occurred because of these orcas in captivity." This scholarly article truly responded directly to my question that there have been significant cases of deaths and attacks documented in captivity, but not in the wild. So for my interview, I interviewed a former MSPCA law enforcement officer, and he goes on to tell me that there are direct causes of aggressiveness, and that's because animals are confined. He also tells me that animals that have been abused do have significant behavioral issues and that it is detrimental. So John Carnell dealt with animal abuse, and he in fact said that animal abuse caused these animals to become more aggressive and violent in their nature. So in conclusion, this journey that I went on was very educational, and it was very eye-opening. I had no idea that before this documentary there was no way in knowing that these whales are suffering. The most shocking find was that these whales truly are suffering in captivity, and there is being little done about it. We have a normalized views on what marine parks are like, and that we feel that it is okay to have these animals in captivity. There is direct evidence of animal abuse and trauma in these whales, and SeaWorld does not care for these whales, and that they are just used for revenue. I have 3 additional questions for this line of research. I have one reflection question, and how will we put an end to orca exhibits in marine parks around the world? Another function question, what role does the general public play in the captivity of orcas? And a causation question, in which elements influence marine parks to capture whales and to use them for entertainment purposes? Thank you.